That night, Amara did not sleep. She lay on sheets that probably cost more than her car payment, staring at a ceiling with no cracks, no water stains, no peeling paint. The silence was wrong. Not the thin, anxious silence of a parking lot at 3 a.m., with trucks rumbling past and her own breathing too loud in the back seat. This was thick silence, insulated silence, the kind of quiet the money bought. At 5:47 a.m., she gave up trying. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the cardboard box she'd carried in from the car. Mrs. Park had offered to dispose of it. Amara had said no so sharply the woman had taken a step back. The box sat on the dresser now, between a vase of white peonies and a leather-bound guest book she would never sign. Packing tape sealed the top. Her mother's handwriting on the side in black marker. Amara's things. Keep safe. Her mother had written that label a week before she died. Pancreatic cancer. 11 months from diagnosis to funeral. Grace Cole had spent her last week not crying, not raging, but organizing. Labeling boxes, writing lists, making sure her daughter would find everything she needed when she was gone. Amara hadn't opened this one. She'd opened the others. Clothes for donation, kitchen things for the neighbor. Financial documents, which amounted to a life insurance policy worth $8,000 that barely covered the burial. But this box, the one Grace had labeled with Amara's name, she couldn't touch. Opening it meant her mother was really gone. Keeping it sealed meant some part of Grace was still waiting inside, preserved, patient, alive. But Eleanor Harrison had said her mother's name. Amara pulled the box onto the bed. Her fingers found the edge of the tape. She pulled. Inside, the smell hit her first. Lavender and old paper. Grace's smell. The one no detergent or perfume could replicate because it wasn't a product, it was a person. Amara's eyes blurred. She blinked hard and reached in. A worn leather journal, the spine cracked from years of use. A bundle of dried flowers, lavender, tied with kitchen string. 3 photographs held together with a rubber band. A small velvet pouch containing a gold locket she'd never seen before. And a sealed envelope with Amara written on the front, in her mother's careful script. She reached for the photographs first. The top one stopped her heart. A young woman, black, radiant, mid-20s, standing in a garden with her arm around an older white woman. Both of them laughing. The older woman's head was thrown back, silver hair loose in the wind. The younger woman was looking at her with an expression Amara recognized instantly because she'd seen it every day of her childhood. Pure, unguarded love. She turned the photo over. The handwriting was her mother's. Miss Ellie and me. Summer 1989. The happiest I ever was. Miss Ellie, Grandma Ellie. Amara's hands began to shake. She looked at the second photo. The same 2 women, older now, sitting at a kitchen table with flour on their hands and a half-finished pie between them. On the back, Eleanor's birthday. She always wanted sweet potato pie. No one else knew. March 15th. The third photo was different. Grace alone, standing outside what looked like the Harrison estate's front gate. She wasn't smiling. Her hand rested on her stomach, which curved slightly beneath her dress. On the back, 3 words in handwriting that shook, "I have to go." Amara opened the journal. The entries spanned 15 years. 15 years of her mother living in this house, walking these halls, sleeping in a room that might have been down the corridor from the one Amara sat in now. Grace had started as a kitchen assistant at 22. Within a year, Eleanor had promoted her to personal companion. The entries were warm, detailed, full of a happiness Amara had never heard in her mother's voice during her own childhood. Miss Ellie taught me to read financial reports today. Said every woman should know where the money goes. I told her I can barely balance my checkbook. She laughed so hard she spilled her tea. Biscuit got into the garden again. Ellie chased him for 20 minutes in her nightgown. I thought I'd die laughing. She told me if I ever told anyone, she'd fire me. I told her she couldn't afford to lose me. She said I was right. Today, Ellie told me I'm the daughter she never had. I couldn't speak for an hour. No one has ever said anything like that to me. No one. Amara read until her vision swam. Then she found the entry that broke her. Mr. Edward called me into his study today. He said my services are no longer required. I asked why. He looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe and said, "Because I know what you are, and I know what's growing inside you, and neither of you belong in this house." He said if I didn't leave by morning, he would make sure I never worked again. Anywhere. He said he would tell Eleanor I stole from her. He said Eleanor would believe him because blood is thicker than anything. I'm pregnant. I can't fight him. I can't tell Miss Ellie the truth because it would mean telling her what her own son is. It would destroy her. I have to go. God forgive me. I have to go. Amara closed the journal. She sat motionless for a long time. The room was silent. The peonies on the dresser were white and perfect and obscene. Her mother had lived here, had loved here, had been thrown out by a man who saw a pregnant black woman as a stain on his family's name, and she had carried that secret for 26 years. She'd raised Amara alone, never asking for help, never explaining the hymns she sang, or the tea she made, or the cake she baked every March 15th. She had hidden Eleanor Harrison in the ordinary rituals of their daily life, and Amara had absorbed everyone without knowing what they meant. The locket. She opened the velvet pouch and pressed the clasp. Inside, 2 tiny photographs, one of Grace, young, smiling, one of Eleanor, the same age as the garden photo. On the inside of the clasp, an engraving so small she had to hold it to the light. For my Grace, with all my heart. E.H. Amara pressed the locket to her chest and bent forward until her forehead touched her knees. She didn't open the envelope? Not yet. She couldn't take any more. The kitchen was bright when she came downstairs, eyes washed, jaw set. A chef she hadn't met was making breakfast. Lily's chair was empty. Mrs. Park informed her that Lily was with her tutor until 9. Amara poured coffee from a pot that probably cost more than her coffee maker and stood by the window, watching the garden where she'd first met Lily. Julian appeared at 7:12 a.m. He wore a charcoal suit, phone already in hand, every line of his body taut with purpose. He stopped when he saw her. His gaze moved to her face, lingered on her reddened eyes. He didn't comment. "I have questions," he said. "So do I." He set his phone on the counter face down, a deliberate act. She'd learn later that Julian Harrison never silenced his phone for anyone except Lily and Eleanor. He did it now without hesitation. "My grandmother called you Grace. She said you came back. She hasn't spoken that name in decades." He leaned against the island, arms crossed. "I need to know why." Amara's fingers tightened around the mug. "My mother's name was Grace. Grace Cole. She died 13 months ago. I didn't know about any connection to your family until last night." His eyes narrowed. "What changed last night?" She hesitated. Then she told him. The box, the photographs, the journal. 15 years of her mother's life spent in this house as Eleanor's companion. Edward Harrison's ultimatum. The secret pregnancy. The exile. Julian didn't move during any of it. His expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted, darkened, like a door being sealed from the inside. "My father," he said quietly. "Your father." Silence stretched between them. Julian turned to the window. His reflection stared back, hollow. "He raised me in this house," he said. "Told me the company was everything. Legacy was everything. Control was everything. He straightened his tie at this table every morning and told me that weakness was the only unforgivable sin." He looked at Amara. He never once mentioned a woman named Grace. Amara set down the mug. She didn't trust her hands. Eleanor mentioned her. "Yesterday, she's still in there, somewhere, holding onto your mother's memory." "My mother's memory," she corrected herself. "Holding onto Grace." Julian's jaw worked. "My grandmother raised me," he said. His voice dropped. "Not my father. Her. She taught me to read. She came to every school performance. She sat with me when I had nightmares. Everything decent in me came from her." He paused, "And now I lose her a little more each morning. Some mornings I woke in and she thinks I'm my father. She flinches. From me." His throat moved because she sees him. Amara's chest ached. "There's a clinical trial," he continued, voice controlled again, steel sliding back into place. "A new treatment for early to moderate Alzheimer's. The enrollment window closes in 6 weeks. If she qualifies, it won't reverse the damage, but it could slow the progression significantly. buy us years instead of months. He met her eyes. She hasn't been lucid enough to pass the screening evaluation consistently. Until yesterday. Until you. The weight of that sentence settled between them. A car door slammed outside. Julian's posture changed instantly. His shoulders squared. His jaw tightened. Amara saw Mrs. Park hurry past the kitchen window toward the front entrance, her composure replaced by something close to dread. Julian exhaled. My uncle, Richard Harrison, entered the kitchen like he owned it, which Amara would learn he believed he did. Tall, silver-haired, tanned from somewhere expensive. He wore a blue blazer over a cashmere sweater and smiled the kind of smile that never warmed anything. Julian, he said smoothly, and our new addition. He looked at Amara the way someone examines a stain on a tablecloth. Miss Cole, is it? How lovely. How quaint. Amara didn't respond. Richard turned to Julian. I wanted to discuss Mother's care plan. I've been speaking with Dr. Harmon about transitioning her to Willowbrook. Full-time facility, round-the-clock specialist. Julian's voice was flat. She's staying here. Richard's smile didn't waver. Julian, she wandered the hallway at 2 a.m. last week. She thought the coat rack was your father. This house isn't equipped. It's exactly equipped, Julian cut in. I built the medical wing. I hired the staff. She's not going anywhere. Richard raised his palms in mock surrender. Of course. Just thinking of her comfort. His eyes slid to Amara again, lingering this time, calculating. I'm curious, Miss Cole. Julian tells me you have a remarkable connection with Mother. How long have you known our family? I haven't, Amara said. I met your mother yesterday. Richard's smile sharpened. Isn't that something? He turned to Julian. We'll talk soon, nephew. He left the way he came, unhurried, territorial. Amara watched him go. The hair on the back of her neck wouldn't lie flat. Julian was watching her. He's going to be a problem, she said. Julian's mouth tightened. He already is. He's been pushing to have her declared incompetent for 2 years. If he gets guardianship, he controls the estate, the trusts, all of it. Eleanor built this family's wealth. Richard wants to spend it. Amara looked at the doorway where Richard had stood. And me being here gives him ammunition. Julian didn't deny it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A text. Heard you landed somewhere nice. Don't forget who helped you when nobody else would. You owe me, Amara. Don't make me come collect. Marcus. She deleted the message and turned the phone face down on the counter. Julian noticed but didn't ask. That night, Amara sat on the guest bed and pulled the photograph from the nightstand drawer. Grace and Eleanor in the garden, arms linked, laughing. She ran her thumb across her mother's face. The silk sheets rustled beneath her. Fresh flowers scented the air. The closet was stocked with simple, beautiful clothes in her exact size. She hadn't asked for any of it. What did you get me into, Mama? She whispered. The photograph didn't answer, but downstairs, faint as a heartbeat through the floor, Eleanor was humming again. 3 days in, and Amara found a rhythm she didn't expect. Mornings belonged to Lily. Breakfast in the sunlit kitchen, the little girl's legs swinging under a chair, too tall for her, telling elaborate stories about a kingdom where rabbits ruled and the only law was mandatory dessert after every meal. Amara cut her toast into triangles because Lily insisted the squares tasted different, and she learned not to argue because honestly, maybe they did. Lily had a way of stating absurdities with such conviction that you started to believe them. You know what, Amara? I think Bunny should have his own chair. I think you're right. And a plate. Don't push it. Lily grinned. She had 2 missing teeth and the smile of someone who trusted entirely, recklessly, the way only a child who'd been hurt could. She gave everything to Amara, every drawing, every secret, every breathless story about the spider she'd found in the bathroom that she'd named Gerald. And when Amara tucked her in at night, Lily would hold her hand and whisper the same thing. You're still here. I'm still here. Afternoons belonged to Eleanor. The good days were gifts. Eleanor would sit in the sunroom, sharp-eyed and present, and tell Amara about the garden, the company, the years she'd spent building something from nothing after her husband died and left her with debts and a son who resented her for surviving. She never mentioned Grace on the good days. She talked around her like a river flowing around a stone, the shape of the absence visible in everything she didn't say. The bad days were harder. Eleanor would call Amara by wrong names, sometimes Grace, Sometimes Catherine, who Amara learned had been Eleanor's sister, dead since 1987. Sometimes Eleanor didn't speak at all, just sat and stared at the window with an expression so lost it made Amara's ribs ache. But every day, good or bad, Amara sang. The hymn her mother had taught her. She didn't know its name. She'd never heard it in church or on the radio or anywhere outside the walls of their small apartment. Grace had sung it while cooking, while braiding Amara's hair, while sitting in the hospital bed during those final weeks when her voice was barely a whisper and her fingers still tapped the rhythm on the blanket. The first time Amara sang it to Eleanor, the old woman went still. Her hands stopped trembling, her eyes focused. And then, slowly, her lips moved, forming the words Amara had never known, because Grace had only ever hummed the melody. Eleanor sang the words. Tears ran down her face, but she smiled. She reached for Amara's hand and held it with a grip that was steady for the first time in days. Grace used to sing that, she said clearly, every evening. While she made dinner, she had the most beautiful voice. Amara's throat closed. She sounds like she was wonderful. Eleanor looked at her with sudden piercing clarity. She was everything, she whispered, and I lost her. On the fourth morning, Lily presented Amara with a drawing. 4 stick figures standing under a yellow sun. Labels in wobbly crayon letters. Mrs. Daddy, Nana Ellie, Amara, a heart drawn around all 4. This is our family now, Lily said. She said it like a fact, like gravity. Amara pinned it to the refrigerator and didn't trust herself to speak. That night, she couldn't sleep. She went to the library at 2:14 a.m. because it was the farthest room from the bedrooms, and she didn't want anyone to hear her cry. The shelves stretched 2 stories high, ladders on brass rails, first editions behind glass. A fire had been left to die in the grate, embers still glowing orange. She sank into a leather chair and pressed her hands over her face and breathed. She didn't hear him come in. I use whiskey. Julian's voice came from the doorway. Low, rough, for the nights that won't end. She dropped her hands. He stood against a frame in a black t-shirt and sweatpants, hair pushed back like he'd been running his fingers through it for hours. No suit, no armor. Dark circles carved beneath his eyes. A crystal glass in his hand untouched. Couldn't sleep, she said. He walked to the chair across from her and sat. The fire's glow caught the sharp lines of his face, softened them. He looked younger without the suit, more human, more tired. She had another episode today, he said quietly. He wasn't looking at her, but at the fire. During lunch. She stood up, walked to the front door and tried to leave, said she had to find Grace, that Grace needed her. He took a breath. Security brought her back. She didn't recognize them. She fought. He paused. She's 79 years old and she fought 2 grown men because she thought they were keeping her from someone she loves. Amara's chest split. She raised me, Julian said again. The words seemed to cost him something each time. Not my father, not nannies, not boarding schools, her. She taught me that strength isn't about control, that real power is knowing when to be soft. He looked at Amara for the first time, and I'm watching her disappear. She's in there, I can see her, but the door keeps closing and I can't hold it open, no matter how much money I throw at it. You can't buy time, Amara said. Number. His jaw tightened. But I can fight for it. The trial. If she can pass the screening evaluation, if she can demonstrate consistent lucidity during assessment, she qualifies. The treatment could slow the decline by 60%. He leaned forward. She hasn't been consistently lucid in months. But when you sing, when you're near her, something comes back. She's clearer. The doctors have noticed. The air between them shifted. Amara was suddenly aware of how quiet the library was, how close the chairs were, how the firelight turned his eyes from dark brown to amber. You make her remember, he said. I don't know how, I don't care how, but you do. She looked at the glass in his hand. You haven't touched your drink. He glanced down like he'd forgotten it existed. Set it on the side table. I don't actually drink, he said. I just hold it, gives my hands something to do when I can't fix things. She almost smiled. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. His mouth twitched, something close to a laugh, gone before it formed. He stood. Crossed to the window. The garden was silver under the moon. the fountain a pale shape in the distance. She should have let the silence hold. Instead, she stood too, moved to the window beside him, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for her, for Lily." He hesitated. His hand moved toward her hair, hovered. His fingers curled. He pulled back. "I shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" He didn't answer. The space between them hummed. A crash shattered the silence. They both moved at once, instinct overriding everything. Down the hallway, past Lily's room, where the girl slept soundly, toward Eleanor's suite. The door was open. The bedside lamp was on the floor, shattered. Eleanor stood in the hallway in her white nightgown, barefoot, swaying. Her eyes were wide and wild, fixed on something neither of them could see. "Grace," she called. Her voice cracked. "Grace, where are you? Don't leave me here alone. They're going to send me away." She turned toward the staircase, one step then another, unsteady. Amara moved first. She reached Eleanor before Julian could, stepping gently into her path. She didn't grab her, didn't raise her voice. She took Eleanor's hands, cold and fragile as paper, and she started to hum. The hymn, the only bridge between them. Eleanor stopped. Her breathing slowed. Her fingers curled around Amara's. The wildness drained from her eyes, replaced by something raw and aching. She looked at Amara's face, searching. "Don't leave me again," she whispered. "Promise you won't leave." "I'm right here," Amara said. "I'm not going anywhere." Eleanor's body sagged. She folded into Amara's arms, small and trembling, and Amara held her the way she imagined Grace once had. Tight, careful, full of a love that didn't have a name yet but was growing roots. Julian stood behind them. He hadn't moved. When Amara looked up, his face was open in a way she hadn't seen before. Gratitude, fear, wonder, grief, all of it at once, all of it unguarded. He looked like a man watching someone save the only person who'd ever saved him. The doctor arrived within 30 minutes. Eleanor was stable. Mild hypothermia from standing in the drafty hall, elevated heart rate, confusion, but stable. Sedated now, sleeping in her bed. With the monitors, Mrs. Park had learned to read pulsing green. In the hallway, Julian leaned against a wall. He looked like he'd aged 5 years. "She's declining faster," he said. "The trial window's 4 weeks now." "Less." Amara stood across from him. The hymn still echoed in her chest. "She thinks I'm Grace," she said. He met her eyes. Maybe that's not the worst thing. Something passed between them. Heavy, unnamed, dangerous. "Maybe not," she said. Neither of them moved. The photos hit the internet before breakfast. Amara didn't know how. Later, Julian's security team would trace the leak to a landscaping contractor who'd snapped pictures on his phone and sold them to a tabloid for $12,000. But that morning, all she knew was that her face was on every gossip site in the country. The headlines were creative in their cruelty. "Harrison heirs live-in black nanny." "Gold digger or caretaker? Who is the mystery woman in the billionaire's guest wing?" And the worst one, the one that made her stomach lurch. From the streets to the sheets, inside, Julian Harrison's suspicious new hire. Comment sections erupted. She scrolled through them in the guest room, phone trembling in her hand. She's obviously after the money. Classic setup. Who wears a thrift store dress to a billionaire's house and expects us to believe she's not running a con? I give it 2 months before she's pregnant and lawyered up. Julian appeared in the doorway. "Stop looking. I can't. They're saying I'm a—" "I know what they're saying." He crossed the room, took the phone from her hand, and set it face down on the nightstand. His fingers brushed hers. Neither of them acknowledged it. "They're wrong," he said, "and in 48 hours they'll find someone else to destroy. And until then, we protect what matters." He nodded toward the hallway. "Lily hasn't seen it. Eleanor doesn't know. We keep it that way." His PR team issued a statement by noon. Terse, clinical, protective. Chites. The Harrison family requests privacy regarding household staffing decisions. Speculation about personal relationships is unfounded and unwelcome. It didn't stop anything, but it drew a line. Victoria Kang arrived at the 3. Amara had never met her, but she recognized the type immediately. Tailored cream suit, hair that cost more than Amara's car, perfume that announced itself from 10 feet away. She swept into the foyer like she belonged there, kissing Julian on both cheeks in a way that lingered too long. Julian, darling, I came as soon as I heard. This media nonsense must be so stressful. Julian stepped back. Victoria, what do you need? She pouted. Perfectly. Just checking on the family, on Eleanor. She turned to Amara with a smile that showed every tooth. And you must be the nanny everyone's talking about. How brave of you taking on something like this. It must be so overwhelming. Such a big house, such a different world. Amara held her gaze. I manage. Victoria's smile didn't flicker. I'm sure you do. She stayed for 45 minutes, drifting through rooms like she was cataloging the silverware. Amara watched her pause at Eleanor's door, watched her pull out her phone and type something, watched her look at the family photos on the mantel with an expression that was not grief, not concern, but calculation. After she left, Amara found Julian in his study. That woman is not your friend. Julian's jaw tightened. She's Richard's proxy. She's been feeding him information for months. They want me destabilized. They want Eleanor removed so Richard can claim guardianship and liquidate everything she built. And me being here helps their case. He didn't argue. 2 days later, the first real blow landed. Not from the media, from Eleanor. It was a good day. The best day. Eleanor had woken clear-eyed and sharp, asking for tea in the morning paper, correcting Mrs. Park's posture, and complimenting Amara's dress in the same breath. She'd played 3 rounds of cards with Lily and won all of them with a competitiveness that made the little girl shriek with delight. After lunch, Lily went to her tutor. The house settled into afternoon quiet. Amara brought Eleanor tea in the sunroom, honey and lemon, and they sat together watching the garden. Eleanor spoke first. You're not Grace. Amara went still. Eleanor turned to look at her. Her eyes were the clearest Amara had ever seen them. Sharp, focused, entirely present. You have her face, she said. Her hands. Her way of tilting your head when you're thinking. But you're not her. You're hers. Amara couldn't breathe. You're Grace's daughter. The room blurred. Amara tried to speak and couldn't. Eleanor reached across and took both her hands. Grace came to me when she was 22, Eleanor said. She was applying for a kitchen job. I took one look at her and I knew she was going to change my life. She became my companion, my confidant, my daughter in every way that mattered. She taught me to make sweet potato pie. I taught her to read stock reports. She paused. We were happy, genuinely happy, for 15 years. What happened? Amara whispered. Eleanor's face hardened. My son happened. Edward. He was cold, controlling, and he saw Grace as a threat to the family image. When she became pregnant, he gave her an ultimatum: leave or be destroyed. He threatened to tell me she'd stolen from the estate, to ruin her reputation, to make sure she never worked again. Amara's hands were shaking. She left to protect you, Eleanor said, and to protect me. Because if she'd stayed and told me the truth, I would have had to choose between my son and the woman I loved like a daughter. She didn't want me to face that. So she vanished. Eleanor's voice broke. I searched for her. For 20 years I searched. I hired investigators, posted inquiries, called every call in every phone book I could find. I never found her. I thought she was alive somewhere, living well, maybe thinking of me sometimes. She gripped Amara's hands. I didn't know she was gone. Amara's tears came then, hard, silent, the kind that bent your whole body. She died 13 months ago, she managed. Pancreatic cancer. She never told me about you, about any of this. She just sang your hymn and baked your cake and made your tea, and I never knew why. Eleanor pulled her close. The old woman's arms were thin but fierce. She held Amara the way a grandmother holds a grandchild who's been lost and found, with desperation and relief and a love that predates memory. Your mother loved you enough to leave me, she said against Amara's hair. Don't you ever feel guilty for being here? She sent you back. Whether she meant to or not, she sent you back. They held each other until the tea went cold. Julian found the journal that evening. Amara had left it on the kitchen counter, and he'd picked it up, read the entry about his father, and gone silent in a way that emptied the room of air. She found him standing in the hallway an hour later, staring at the portrait of Edward Harrison that hung between two windows. A tall man, cold eyes, strong jaw that Julian had inherited along with the company and the name and apparently the capacity for cruelty. Julian didn't look at her when she approached. He drove her out, he said. My father looked at a pregnant woman who had done nothing but love his mother, and he drove her out like she was nothing. Amara stood beside him. She didn't touch him. She didn't speak. Everything I built, he continued. The company, the reputation, the name, it's all standing on a foundation he poisoned. He raised me in this house where he'd committed that act, and he never said a word, never showed a flicker of guilt. His hand rose to the frame, his fingers pressed against the gilded edge until his knuckles went white. Then slowly, deliberately, he turned the portrait to face the wall. He walked away. When Amara checked later, the portrait was gone. Her phone buzzed at 10:47 p.m. Richard. Julian told her later he'd gotten the number from a staffing agency database. The voice on the other end was smooth, unhurried. Miss Cole, I wanted to give you fair notice. I've filed a petition for an independent cognitive evaluation of my mother. If the results indicate she's no longer competent to manage her affairs, guardianship transfers to me. At that point, all household staffing decisions become mine, including yours. Julian's voice came from behind her, lethal and low, and she hadn't heard him enter. Try it. 2 words. The call ended. The doctor arrived 3 days later. He was not the doctor Julian had hired. Amara knew something was wrong the moment he walked in. Dr. Ashton, according to his credentials, independent evaluator, court appointed at Richard Harrison's request. He was thin, precise, and he looked at Eleanor the way a mechanic looks at a car he's already decided to junk. The evaluation took place in the sunroom. Amara wasn't allowed inside. Julian sat in the hallway rigid, while Mrs. Park monitored through the glass. Amara paced the kitchen listening. She could hear the questions through the thin walls. What year is it, Mrs. Harrison? Who is the current president? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? The questions were standard, but the follow-ups weren't. Can you tell me who manages your financial accounts? Have you ever felt confused about where you are? Do you sometimes see people who aren't there? Eleanor's voice grew smaller with each question. Amara had spent enough time in underfunded clinics during her mother's illness to know when a test was being gamed. Leading questions designed to amplify confusion, rapid-fire prompts that didn't give the patient time to orient, deliberate disruption of the routines that helped Eleanor stay grounded. No tea, no music, no familiar faces. She pushed through the sunroom door. Dr. Ashton looked up, irritated. This evaluation is private. She's answering questions without her support system present, without her routine, without any of the anchoring tools her actual medical team has documented as essential to her cognitive function. Amara's voice was steady. This isn't an evaluation. It's a setup. Miss Cole, I suggest you leave before I note your interference in my report. Julian appeared behind her. Dr. Ashton, was it? He crossed the room in 3 strides. My legal team will be reviewing your methodology, your funding sources, and your relationship with Richard Harrison. I suggest you leave before they arrive. The doctor left, but the damage was already done. The falsified report was filed with the court before sunset. Richard's guardianship petition moved forward. Victoria's package arrived the next morning. A leather portfolio, hand-delivered to Julian's study. Inside, a dossier on Amara, bank records showing her debts, her mother's employment history reframed with poisonous spin. Grace Cole, a pattern of inserting herself into wealthy households, and fabricated screenshots of search queries, supposedly from Amara's phone. Harrison family net worth, Eleanor Harrison dementia, Harrison estate inheritance. Julian read it in silence, his face drained of expression. Not anger, not shock. Something worse. Blankness. Did you know, he said without looking up, before you came here? Did you know who she was? No. Then how do you explain this? He pushed the dossier across the desk. Amara looked at the screenshots, the search dates, the browser history. None of it was hers. She would have laughed if his face hadn't looked like that. Because someone wants you to stop trusting me, she said. His jaw worked. He stood. He walked out. Hours passed. Amara packed a bag. She folded the borrowed clothes neatly on the bed, placed the journal and photos in her mother's box, and carried it to the foyer. Her hands were steady. Her chest was not. Lily found her. The girl stood at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, bunny pressed to her chest. Her face was already crumbling. "Where are you going?" Amara set the box down. "I have to go, baby." "No." Lily came down the stairs one at a time, each step heavier than the last. "You promised." She reached the bottom. Her chin trembled. "Everyone promises and then they leave. Daddy promised Mommy would come back and she didn't. You promised you'd stay and now you're holding a box." Amara knelt. Lily threw her arms around her neck so hard it hurt. "Don't go," she sobbed. "Don't be like everyone else, please." Amara held her, closed her eyes. Julian's voice came from the garden entrance. He stood in the doorway, coat damp from the evening air, and his face was wrecked, not composed, not controlled, shattered. "I'm sorry," he said. The words sounded torn from somewhere deep. "I was terrified and I aimed it at you." Amara didn't turn around. "You looked at me like I was a threat." "After everything." "I know." His voice cracked, a sound she'd never heard from him before. "I've spent my whole life protecting the people I love by pushing everyone else away. I don't know how to stop." Lily looked between them, tears still streaming. She pulled Amara's hand and Julian's hand and pressed them together. "Fix it," she said fiercely. "Fix it right now." Neither of them pulled away. That night, a commotion at the gate. Security called Julian's phone at 9:23 p.m. A man demanding entry, claiming he was family of Amara Cole, claiming she owed him money, threatening to sell information to the tabloids. Marcus. Julian's security detained him. Amara watched the footage on the monitor in the study. Marcus, hands zip-tied, ranting about how she owed him, how he'd made calls, how someone named Richard had promised him $50,000 for anything he could provide on Amara's past. He was still screaming when the police arrived. Julian stood behind her. His hand rested on the back of her chair, not touching her, but there, she spoke first. "He used to be my boyfriend, 4 years ago. He stole my mother's car while she was in chemo, sold it for drug money. I filed a report. He was never charged. After Mom died, he found out about the life insurance, showed up at the funeral asking for his share. I changed my number 3 times. He keeps finding new ones." Julian's hand moved to her shoulder, rested there. "He won't find another one," he said. Later, after the police left and Lily was asleep and the house was dark, Julian found Amara in the study. He closed the door. She stood by the window, arms crossed, holding herself together. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "I lashed out at you because I am falling in love with you and it terrifies me." She turned. His face was raw. "Because the last time I loved someone," she walked out on Lily without looking back. Packed a bag while our daughter slept and left a note that said, "I'm not built for this. 3 years old. Lily was 3. His voice shook. "And you sing to my grandmother at 2 a.m. You let my daughter draw on your hands with markers that don't wash off for 3 days. You fight for people who can't fight for themselves. If you leave, we don't recover. Any of us." Amara's eyes burned. "I'm not leaving, Eleanor. I'm not leaving Lily," she paused. "I'm not leaving you." He crossed the room. She met him halfway. His arms came around her, tight, fierce, like he was holding the walls from falling. She pressed her face into his chest and breathed him in. Cedar and something warm she couldn't name. His hand cradled the back of her head. His lips pressed against her temple. "Stay," he murmured, not a question. "I'm already here." At 3:38 a.m., her phone rang. Julian answered. His face went gray. Eleanor was outside. They found her on the driveway in the rain. Barefoot, nightgown soaked through, clinging to her thin frame. She was standing perfectly still, face turned up to the sky, arms outstretched, calling for grace. Amara reached her first. She stripped her own coat and wrapped it around Eleanor's shoulders. The old woman's skin was ice. Her lips were blue. But her eyes, when they found Amara's face, were clear. "Don't let them take me away," Eleanor whispered. "Don't let them forget me. No one is taking you anywhere." Amara's voice broke. "I've got you." Julian lifted his grandmother, carried her inside like she weighed nothing. Amara ran ahead, turning on lights, pulling blankets. They worked together without speaking, without thinking, the way people move when love has replaced hesitation. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. Eleanor was stabilized. Hypothermia, elevated heart rate, severe confusion upon admission, but responsive to treatment. The clinical trial screening was 10 days away. Richard's guardianship petition hearing was in 14. At the hospital, Julian paced the private waiting room while Amara sat motionless in a plastic chair. His lawyers called 3 times. His phone buzzed with notifications he didn't read. Victoria's name appeared on a news alert. She'd leaked the con artist dossier to 3 media outlets. Amara stood. "I need air." She walked through empty corridors past nurses who nodded sympathetically. Took the elevator to the roof. The hospital garden was small. A few benches, potted plants, a view of the city that didn't care about any of them. She gripped the railing and cried. Not quiet tears. Deep wrenching sobs that came from the place where her mother's secrets had lived for 26 years. She cried for Grace, who had loved Eleanor so fiercely. She'd sacrifice her own happiness to protect her. For Eleanor, who was losing the ability to remember the person she'd spent 2 decades searching for. For herself, standing on a rooftop in borrowed clothes, holding a dead woman's locket, trying to keep a family together that wasn't even hers. "Why didn't you tell me, Mama? I could have come sooner. She wouldn't have been alone all those years. You wouldn't have carried it alone. Why didn't you tell me?" The wind didn't answer. She went back inside. Julian was in the waiting room, alone, standing when she entered. She crossed to him and stopped inches away. "When this is over," she said, "promise me one thing. Anything. Don't let her forget Grace, even when the disease takes everything else. Keep that name alive. In this family, in Lily, in whatever comes next. Don't let it disappear." His eyes glistened. He pressed his forehead to hers, held it there. "I won't," he whispered. "I promise." They stood like that until a nurse came to tell them Eleanor was sleeping. The court hearing was in 4 days. The trial enrollment deadline was in 3. And Richard Harrison had one more card to play. He played it on a Tuesday. Amara learned about it from Julian's lawyer, who called at 7:03 a.m. with the kind of voice people use when they're delivering news that might break something. Julian's ex-wife, Sophia, had filed an emergency custody motion for Lily. The filing cited an unstable home environment, media scandal, an unvetted caretaker with personal debts, and a history of association with a known criminal, meaning Marcus, and the declining mental health of the primary female guardian, meaning Eleanor. The motion requested immediate temporary custody pending a full hearing. Sophia had listed Richard Harrison as a supporting witness, and Madame Victoria Kang as a character reference. Julian didn't shatter. He went cold. His entire body stilled, and when he spoke, his voice was the voice Amara imagined he used in boardrooms when someone was about to lose everything. "Call the team, all of them, end this today." But Amara was already moving. She'd been preparing for this without knowing it. Every night for the past 2 weeks, she'd been organizing. Not just Eleanor's care routines, not just Lily's schedule, everything. The bribed doctor's financial records, which Julian's security team had pulled, and she'd cross-referenced with Richard's personal accounts. Victoria's fabricated dossier, which a digital forensics contact from Amara's college roommate had analyzed and found the metadata proved the screenshots were created 6 days after Amara had entered the household, not before. Recorded phone calls Marcus had left on her voicemail, unencrypted, stupid, in which he named Richard Harrison by name and quoted the exact dollar amount he'd been promised, and Sophia's own communications obtained through Julian's legal team, showing she'd been in contact with Richard for 3 months before resurfacing, negotiating not custody, but shares in a competing medical firm Richard was quietly building with funds he planned to siphon from Eleanor's estate. Amara compiled everything onto a single drive. She walked into Julian's study, set it on his desk, and said, "I'm not hiding anymore. Send it to the judge. Send it to every outlet that ran Victoria's lies. Let them see what they actually did. Julian stared at her. Then at the drive. You just dismantled a 3-month conspiracy in 2 weeks. I'm a woman who survived on $47 and a dead phone. She held his gaze. You learned to keep receipts. For the first time since she'd known him, Julian Harrison smiled. Not a twitch, not a ghost. A real, full, devastating smile that transformed his entire face. The evidence went to the judge that afternoon. Copies went to 4 major outlets by evening. By midnight, the story turned. Headlines no longer screamed about the mystery nanny. They screamed about Richard Harrison's financial connections to a physician who'd falsified a cognitive evaluation, about Victoria Kang's fabrication of evidence against a household employee, about Sophia Harrison's 3-month correspondence with her ex-husband's uncle, negotiating company shares in exchange for a custody filing designed to destabilize Julian's position, about Marcus, already in custody, naming Richard as the man who paid him. The guardianship petition was dismissed before it reached a hearing. The judge's statement was 3 sentences long, and 2 of them referenced fraud. Sophia's custody motion was withdrawn by her own attorney, who cited irreconcilable conflicts of interest. Richard Harrison was removed from the song group board in a vote that took 11 minutes. Victoria Kang's social media went dark. Julian called Amara from the courthouse steps. It's done. All of it? All of it, he paused. You did this, we did this. Eleanor was enrolled in the clinical trial the following morning. The screening evaluation, conducted by her actual medical team in her own sunroom, with her tea and her music and Amara beside her, showed consistent lucidity scores above the threshold. The lead neurologist called Julian personally. She qualifies. We begin treatment immediately. The first infusion happened on a Thursday. Eleanor sat in a hospital chair, EV in her thin arm, watching a nature documentary Lily had chosen for her. Lily sat on the floor drawing. Amara held Eleanor's free hand. Julian stood by the window, arms crossed, watching all 3 of them, like a man who couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The treatment wouldn't cure her. Nothing could undo what the disease had already taken, but it could slow the thief, could hold the door open longer, could buy mornings where Eleanor woke and knew her own name, her grandson's face, the sound of a hymn that carried 30 years of love in its melody. 2 weeks after the first treatment, Eleanor had her clearest day in months. She came to breakfast dressed, hair brushed, eyes sharp. She corrected Julian's tie. She helped Lily with her spelling homework. She asked Amara about Grace's final days, and Amara told her everything. The hospital, the singing, the way Grace had organized boxes so her daughter would be taken care of. And Eleanor listened with tears streaming and hands steady and said, "That's my Grace," brave until the very last breath. That evening, Lily tugged Amara's hand. They were in the garden, watching fireflies blink in the hedgerow. Julian was inside on the phone, handling the last of the legal aftermath. Eleanor dozed in her chair on the terrace, a blanket on her knees, the journal open in her lap. Amara, yeah, baby. Lily was quiet for a moment. She held Bunny against her chest, and her gray eyes were serious in the fading light. Can I call you Mommy? Amara's heart stopped. Lily rushed on. You don't have to say yes. I know you're not my real mom. My real mom left and she's not coming back, and I'm okay with that because she wasn't very nice to Daddy, and she never played with me like you do. But you feel like a mommy. You feel like what a mommy is supposed to be. And I asked Bunny, and he said it's okay. Amara knelt. The grass was cool under her knees, the sky was going purple. Lily's face was so open, so trusting, so completely unprotected that it hurt to look at. I would love that, Amara whispered. Lily threw her arms around her neck. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, brave girl. Julian stood in the doorway. She didn't know how long he'd been there. His eyes were bright, his jaw tight, his hand pressed flat against the frame, like he needed it to stay upright. That night, after Lily was asleep with Bunny and her drawings in a nightlight shaped like a star, Julian led Amara to the garden. The terrace was quiet. Eleanor had gone to bed early, humming. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. He stopped by the fountain where Amara had first met Lily. A small table had been set, candles flickering, 2 chairs, and Lily's drawing, the one with 4 stick figures and a heart, framed in gold and propped against the centerpiece. Julian faced her. I was a man who built walls so high I thought they were protection, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. Then a woman walked in, humming a hymn, and my grandmother spoke for the first time in weeks. My daughter smiled for the first time in months, and I remembered what it felt like to want something I couldn't control. He reached into his pocket, a small box. He opened it. 3 stones set in a simple gold band, an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. One for Eleanor, one for Lily, one for Amara. He lowered to one knee. Marry me. Not for Eleanor, not for Lily, for us. Because we're already a family. Because you walked into this house with $47 and a cardboard box, and you gave us back everything we lost. Because I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. Messy, terrified, permanent love, the kind that doesn't have an exit strategy. From the terrace, Eleanor's voice carried through the still air, clear as glass. Say yes, girl. I've been waiting 30 years for someone to bring love back to this house. Amara laughed. The tears came with it, warm and free. Yes. Julian exhaled like he'd been holding his breath his entire life. He slid the ring onto her finger, stood and kissed her. Slow, deep. The kind of kiss that tasted like soul and promise, and the end of being alone. 2 months later, under a canopy of white wisteria, in the Harrison garden, they said their vows. The ceremony was small, no press, no rivals, no ghosts. Amara wore white with gold kente cloth woven into the hem, a quiet nod to her mother's heritage. Julian wore a dark suit with an emerald pin on his lapel, Eleanor's gift, the same stone as the engagement ring. Lily served as flower girl, scattering petals with such wild enthusiasm that half of them ended up in her own hair and the other half went directly into the fountain. The vows blended traditions, a hand-fasting cord in green and gold, words spoken in English with a reading from Grace's journal that Eleanor had chosen herself. When the officiant asked if they took each other, Lily shouted from the front row, clutching Bunny so hard his ear bent. They do. The small gathering erupted in laughter. Julian pressed his forehead to Amara's and laughed with them. A real laugh, the kind that comes from a place that's been locked for years and is finally, permanently open. Afterward, Eleanor stood slowly from her chair. The lucid days were more frequent now, stronger. She walked to Amara with steady steps, reached up, and took her face in both hands. The same gesture as the first day, the same thin fingers, the same fierce grip. But this time, her eyes were clear. Grace would be so proud, she said. And so am I. She pressed her forehead to Amara's. My family, Amara held her, held the woman her mother had loved for 15 years and mourned for 26, held the connection that Grace Cole had hidden in hymns and recipes and a cake baked every March 15th, trusting that someday, somehow, it would find its way home. The reception was small and warm. String lights in the garden. Sweet potato pie on every table. Eleanor's recipe, Grace's recipe, Amara's now. Julian danced with Lily on his feet. Eleanor watched from her chair, humming the hymn, keeping time. Later, when the guests had gone and Lily was asleep upstairs with Bunny and a stomach full of cake, Amara and Julian stood on the balcony overlooking the garden. Fireflies drifted in the hedgerow. The fountain murmured. She leaned against him. We made it, we did. She looked up at the stars. I used to think rich people only bought things. Turns out the most valuable thing you gave me was time. Time with her. Time with Lily. Time to become a family. Julian turned her to face him. And you gave me back my heart. All 3 of them. They kissed under the quiet sky. Slow, certain, eternal. Somewhere in the city, headlines had moved on. Richard Harrison's name faded from boardrooms. Victoria's social media stayed dark. Sophia's lawyers stopped calling. Marcus sat in his cell, and no one answered his collect calls. But here, in this garden built on secrets and silence, a nanny from nowhere and a billionaire who'd forgotten how to love had built something unbreakable. A family held together not by blood or money, but by a song passed down from a mother who never stopped loving, to a daughter who never stopped listening, to a woman who never stopped waiting. It started with a birthday no one told her. It ended with a forever no one saw coming. Hi, lovely viewers. Thanks so much for watching till the end. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and click on the notification bell for more exciting stories.